Could you please ask your parents to call before they come over? They didn't do that. Could you please ask your parents to knock before they come in? They didn't do it. And finally, she's like, I'm taking this into my own hands. Hi there. Welcome back to the Mind Your Boundaries podcast, episode number 14. I'm your host and boundary enthusiast, Jessica Miller, and I'm so happy you're here today. The other day, I was scratching my son James's back, and as I was just tickle scratching him, as I've told you before, he loves it when I do that, I was thinking back to I was thinking about how different it is having a sick 14-year-old versus a sick 14-month-old or a sick 4-year-old. It's so different. Like the stress of having sick kiddos in the house, it's awful. It's so awful. The sleep deprivation, just the panic and the stress of not knowing what they need, the congestion, the stuffy nose where they can't breathe. It's so hard. And I was thinking about that and being in the trenches. And what made it even more stressful was how caring and genuinely concerned my mom and Ryan's mom was. They were, dare I say, a little overbearing, a little too much. The calls, the texts, the suggestions, the follow-up to the suggestions 15 minutes later, the drop-ins, the food, all came out of like goodness, but at the same time, we were just barely treading water, and then we always felt like we had to be responding. It was a lot. It got to the point where we would get a message and you could just feel like, oh, you're just so resentful. You're just like, leave me alone. I'm so exhausted. And even though they're just caring about your kid, it just kind of got to the feeling that way. We told them, please, don't text us so much. Just kind of back off. That didn't work. And then we said, we'll text you guys and let you know and give you updates. Like just don't message us. That didn't work. And then we said, you don't have to bring over food and expose yourself and do all that stuff. Like don't just drop in. That didn't work. Nothing worked. These boundaries that we thought we were setting, nothing worked. And then one day, James was sick again, and so here's my little babe. He's got an ear infection. He would get those all the time, and I'm on the couch, scratching his back, and I pick up my phone, and just imagine in a comedy movie where it goes in slow motion, and the big, dad is going across the living room like, no! That's what Ryan did, and he was, going across the living room, don't text our moms. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. If we don't want this wave of overwhelm because they care so much, we need to filter or monitor how much information we put out there. And who was the person putting all that information out there? I'd be like, oh my God, the kids are sick again. It was me. I was stirring it all up all the time. And so Ryan caught that, and he's just like, if we want to have this better, we need to change our behavior. That's what we're talking about today, is figuring out through stories I'm going to teach you and show you how couples were able to shift their thinking about what a boundary is and how they can change their behavior to hold the line and honor their boundary. Today is going to be filled with stories, communication tips, scripts, and a lot of helpful nuggets. And it's really going to deepen our understanding of what a boundary is so that you feel very comfortable setting them in your own life, because they're like our bumper pads. They support the life we want to have, and they strengthen our relationships. Which reminds me, we should have a refresher on what a boundary is. So we're going through this with the definition that a boundary is a self-imposed rule or limit that we create to keep us safe, balanced, and strengthen our relationships. So in the comments, how many times, so now that I'm explaining our light bulb moment, how many times have you set a boundary where you thought, I'm setting a boundary, but that you stood back and you waited for the other person to change? So it wasn't like you set a boundary and then you made the behavioral change. It took us a while to catch on, but you did it the way I did it as well. Because I think it's common. I really do. And I just kind of want to know if you feel like, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. The reason why it's so important to acknowledge that it's within our control to hold the line is because when we don't and we believe we're waiting for the other person to change, that's where our resentment builds. Because we believe, I told you this. I told you this bothers me. I told you exactly what to do, and you're not changing. Therefore, you must not care about me. And you must care more about your needs than my needs. That's where just the resentment just erodes the relationship and everything breaks down. So it's very important that we take a step back and we understand the 3-step process, like identify, communicate, and hold the line. That holding the line is not about, not letting somebody in unless they change. That holding the line is all about you. Boundaries are personal. It begins and ends with you. Hopefully you're excited because I think this is really freeing. Like, how do you feel? Do you feel, oh, okay, like I kind of get it now? Because sometimes we don't set boundaries because we believe they're mean, they're selfish, they're controlling. And now I'm explaining to you, no, they're kind. Like, they only strengthen your relationships. When you don't have boundaries, your boundaries break down or your relationships break down. Boundaries are not selfish. They're necessary. Any family that you're just like, they got it together. I really like that family dynamic. They have healthy boundaries. Let's look at some boundaries in action with some real life stories. Sarah and Max have a son named Jax. He's 8 months old. And if you remember your babies at 8 months, they're starting to become mobile. So he's crawling around, which means a lot of germs on the hands. And kids, everything they touch, their fingers go in their mouth. And so they know that that's happening. Also, Jax tends to get sick very often. His immune system just isn't that great. And they made a very strict rule in their house. When you come in, you have to take off your shoes. Everybody was on board except for Max's dad, Ray. They would have family gatherings, everyone would take off their shoes, and then Ray would just waltz right in. And Sarah's blood would just boil. She would just feel so disrespected, like he just didn't care about them. He didn't care about Jax. So she just let Max have it one night, and she's like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is absolutely ridiculous. You need to go kind of like give him the what's up. So Max is like, okay. He goes out to his dad's workshop just outside of town, and quickly through their discussion, he discovered that his dad has had a falling arch for years now. And in order for him to kind of manage his pain and discomfort, he has these special shoes that he wears. And Max was like, oh, I totally get it. So he goes home, conveys the message in the story to Sarah, and she just feels horrible, right? For thinking all these bad things about him. She goes and gets those grippy shoe covers, and then she even offered Ray, she's like, would you like me to buy the exact same shoes and you can just change into them like Mr. Rogers when you get here? Like, I'm so sorry, we're trying to make you take your shoes off. Like, you don't have to do that. He's like, no, the shoe covers will work just fine. Tommy and Tammy had a very, very busy life with 3 boys in sports. And Tommy's parents were very much involved. They were at all the events. They were over all the time. To the degree, they didn't even knock before they came in. They would just come into the house. And we're talking very frequently. They would just show up and come in. Tammy has nerves like me, where I can be in my own house. I can get so startled that, my child, they would be like this little 4-year-old. And if I wasn't expecting to see them, it was like they were an axe murderer. I would scream and just be like this terrified thing for a second. And that's how startled I get. That's how startled she gets. She was always on edge in the afternoons because she never knew when they were just going to be stopping by. So she's on edge. And then even though she's on edge trying to catch herself and manage it, she would turn around, and wouldn't you know, they'd be standing in the kitchen door frame. She would freak out, and they thought it was funny. She hated it. And so she talked to Tommy and she said, could you please ask your parents to call before they come over? They didn't do that. Could you please ask your parents to knock before they come in? They didn't do it. And finally, she's like, I'm taking this into my own hands because I can't live like this anymore. And she locked the door. For me, you guys might remember in a previous episode, I shared with you that during my work hours, I block my mom. And I do that because we went through years of me trying to get her to respect my boundary by not texting or calling during work hours. And it flopped horribly. And I had a lot of resentment. Our relationship broke down. I had tried different things like do not disturb. I tried to ignore it, but my anxious brain would tell me things like, she's a widow, what if she needs something? And so I would look and get really upset when it was like, I found my pants, but like, and finally it got to the point where it was affecting us so much, like our relationship, that I took it into my own hands and I decided, okay, I'll talk to her in the morning and then I'll let her know, I'll talk to you at 5. If you have an emergency, call Ryan. And during the day when I'm working, I block her number. It works great. You might be wondering, but what did Max say? Like, what did he say to his dad? You might be wondering, how did Tammy respond to her in-laws when she opened the door the first time? And you also might be wondering, how did I explain to my mom? I'm going to block you. I'm going to block you during my workday. Max went out to his dad and he was just very curious. So he was kind. He was clear with his question, but he was very curious as to why his dad wasn't following the rule. And so he didn't go out there like guns a-blazing with aggression and accuse him and blame him of not caring about their 8-month-old, because he knows he loves Jax. So he just went out there to talk to his dad with a very caring curiosity. And all he said was, hey, Dad, you know that Jax is crawling around now and that kid gets sick. If there's a germ or a bug in a mile radius, he's going to get it. And we're just trying to really help the poor kid out. Is there a reason why you don't want to take off your shoes when you come into our house? So there was no reason for his dad to feel attacked or get upset. He was just like, yeah, kid, there is a reason. My arches are falling and I'm in a lot of pain. Boom. For Tammy, she opens the door and her in-laws were just like, WTF? Like, what's going on? And Tammy's like, get in here, guys. Like, come on in. So right away, she didn't keep them on the stoop. She brought them in. Come on in, guys. Like, it's no big deal. I just want to let you know, I did lock the door on purpose. You know how scared I get. This is just kind of wearing me out. Like during the afternoons, I'm on edge and I don't want to feel like that. And I also don't want to scare the crap out of you guys when I get startled so much. So I'm just going to lock the door and then I'll greet you myself and let you in. But anyway, how's it going? Come on in. I made your lemonade. And so she just transitioned the topic. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about the fact that they neglected to call before they came over. It wasn't about the fact that they couldn't knock before they came in. It was about her and her like kind of weirdness that she would get so startled. And then she just transitioned, let's talk about the kids and I made your favorite lemonade. Done. For my mom, I told her how much I struggled to get interrupted and then get back to the task like at the same speed I was working at. And I just said, you know me, Mom, like my main priority is to be a very present mom. And because I'm getting all these interruptions, and it wasn't just from her, and I made sure she knew that. Because of that, I said, I have to do this for myself so that I'm a better mom. But just so you know, I'll talk to you in the morning, I'll talk to you at night, and if you have an emergency, just talk to Ryan. And she was fine with it. She completely understood. As you can see, all the communication messages were delivered focusing on the person that needed the boundary. So Max focused on Jax, and he was curious and kind. Tammy focused on her weird startle, like that she just gets startled so easily. She focused on herself. She didn't focus on her in-laws. For me, I focused on myself. I didn't focus on the fact that my mom doesn't do this to my brothers, that my mom has self-control with them, but not me. I didn't do any of that. I focused on what I need so that I'm a good mom. So for the communication strategy that I want you to pick up on is to really think about, how can I communicate my boundary with kindness, clarity, but also just focus on why the boundary really matters. Like, what is it that I need? Like, what is the boundary serving, which is about you, and then go in for the talk. It goes a lot smoother. Holding the line. Your boundaries are going to get tested. Here's a good example. My father-in-law, I swear he's cousins to Buddy the Elf. He could survive on cookies all day long, 365 days a year. He bonded with our son also through treats. However, James, his little tummy, that did not agree with him. So like clockwork, they would go visit, and every time they would come back at 11 o'clock at night, James would be puking, just screaming with a stomach ache, and because of too much sugar and junk food. And it was awful. So we'd try different things, sending different snacks, having conversations. Nothing worked. One time Ryan even called at like 11 o'clock at night so that they could hear, like, we're not lying. Like, he's really in a lot of pain. Now, did his grandpa want to put him in pain? No. His grandpa was just providing Disneyland. His grandpa was being a grandpa. And so he didn't really understand that what he was doing that to James. So I'm not saying he's doing anything bad. I'm just saying this is what was happening. So how we held the line. So the boundary is, he can't have that many sweet treats or he's going to get sick. When we would be over at their house, when we would be at a family event like Thanksgiving, just anything, once I could start to see, okay, more cupcakes are shuttling in, I would just intervene and I would say, oops, sorry, Grandpa, like, he's already had a couple cupcakes. We haven't had any, substance yet, and we know he gets a tummy ache and we don't want that to happen. And so I would just intervene. When my father-in-law used to watch the kids a couple days a week for a period of time at our house, Ryan was working downstairs, and when he would hear like lunch start and pans banging around, he would know it's like pancake time because that was their thing. So he would just go up and just say, first James has to have something of substance and then he can have pancakes. So here's the alternative, and then you guys can do your bonding thing. So that's how we held the line for us. Now for Emily had a just fine relationship with her mother-in-law, Mary. It just got a little strained after the kids got involved. So after Emily became a mom, she really noticed Mary had a lot of things to say about parenting, a lot of unsolicited advice. It really bothered her. She didn't like it. So Emily would share with Mary a parenting decision that she made, a parenting struggle that she was having. Mary had a completely different perspective on parenting. She was very old school. Emily was very, Montessori-like and modern. And so they very much were different, like on different ends of the spectrum. And Emily was kind of taking it personal, like Mary was telling her she was doing it wrong, or she should do it her way, or her way's better, or judging her. And so what happened was, after she had nicely asked Mary at one point, like, maybe just don't tell me like all the time how you would do things differently. I feel like it's affecting our relationship. And Mary didn't stop. Then she decided, I'm going to take this into my own hands and I won't share as much information. So I won't share as many details about the parenting struggles I'm having. I'm also not going to share so much about the parenting choices that I'm making. So if I give less information out, she'll have less to comment on. Now, in the moment, she still had stuff to talk about. So she would watch Emily interacting with the kids and she would say, whoa, in my day, I could not imagine doing that. And instead of Emily taking offense to it and feeling attacked and judged, she just allowed her to have her moment. She acknowledged that she said that. She acknowledged that another fellow mom had a different way of doing the same thing. And once she had that click in her head, like, there's just another mom. Just because she's my mother-in-law doesn't mean she's not a mom. It's just another mom that has a different way of doing the same thing. Both ways exist. Both ways are just fine. Neither is right and neither is wrong. Once she got to that place, she was able to allow her to say her thing, and she'd be like, I know, we definitely go about this in different ways, but they both work. So she would just kind of entertain, she would engage a little bit, but not right or wrong. It was just, yeah, we both chose to do it differently. That's it. It's just different. It's not wrong or bad. You have so much empowerment when you take a step back and do some self-reflection. Where I see a lot of people getting caught up, like in my DMs, people will reach out and they'll be asking me all these questions, and I can tell they have got caught up in the web of ego. So they're not actually fighting for their boundary anymore, they're fighting to be right. And it's really good if you feel like you're starting to have a lot of animosity, a lot of resentment, to take a step back and really ask yourself, what is this boundary for? Because if you're getting lost in the web of the ego and you're butting heads, well then, that's only going to hurt your relationship. But if you take a step back, for like Sarah and Max, it was to protect Jax. For Tommy and Tammy just didn't want to get startled so much. She didn't want to be in her own home feeling on edge. For me, I just wanted to be a good mom for my kids. I wanted to get my work done before 3 o'clock so that I could be present with them. I really encourage you, if you're starting to feel so much animosity to an in-law or a parent, and you feel like you've set a boundary and they just keep crossing it, make sure you guys aren't caught in this cycle of ego, of being right. Really step back and just be like, what is this all for? Like, what is this boundary protecting? What's this purpose? And then when you go to talk to your loved one about it, you communicate with like this kindness and love. Like, this is where I'm coming from. It's not about being right or wrong. It's not about proving. It's not about you submitting to me. It's about protecting our 8-month-old. It's about, like, I don't want to have a heart attack. It's about me being a good mom. It's not about you. It's not about right or wrong. I truly believe we are put on this earth to make memories with our family. And if we are building resentment and animosity because we do not have proper boundaries supporting us, what kind of life is that? You're not going to want to hang out with them. You're not going to want to make memories with them. And so remember the definition. A boundary is a self-imposed rule or limit to keep you safe, balanced, and strengthen your relationships. It begins and ends with you. You are the one in charge and in control the entire time. That should make you feel so good. I'm telling you, that should make you feel so empowered, so freeing, that you're in control and you're not trying to control or change somebody else. It's not Ray's job to mind their boundaries. It's not Tammy's in-laws to mind her boundaries. It wasn't my mom's job to mind my boundary. It was my job. And it was Emily's job. It wasn't Mary's job. So hopefully this is very clear. Hopefully you've had your own aha moments and you've realized, oh my gosh, now I feel like I can finally set the boundary I need to set, because this is hurting our relationship, because I was looking at it wrong, because now I know what I have to change, because I've been waiting for them to change. I really hope so. And I hope if you had an aha moment, please let me know. I love to read these comments and I love to know that this is actually making an impact and it's helping and serving. If you have any takeaways, so if you're like, no, I already understood what a boundary was from episode 1 or 2, whichever one we talked about it, I already understood that. However, a key takeaway that I pulled from this was the communication strategy. Like the way that Tammy just stepped back and made it kind of appear like she was the weird one, that she didn't want people just showing up randomly inside of her house. Like she didn't want to turn around and just be like, holy crap, Margin Dan are just right there. Like she made it very apparent to them, you're not the weird one. I am. Maybe that is a takeaway for you, is just how the communication strategy works. Perhaps the idea of staying focused on what the boundary's purpose is and not getting caught up in the web of being right and egos, maybe that's your takeaway. I hope this was helpful. I hope that you're really understanding my sole purpose here is to get us to a place where families can come together because we have a better understanding what the purpose of a boundary is, like how you define it, what the purpose of a boundary is, and how you hold the line. And lastly, it's all about you. Remember, it's all about your behavioral change, not waiting for the other person to respect your boundary and make changes themselves. Until next time, friend, make sure you mind your boundaries.